Hello, everyone, and welcome to On the Move, a show where we share transportation sales and marketing success stories. I am Jennifer Kerpis Romaine, Executive Director of the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, which is a trade nonprofit educating and connecting marketing and sales professionals in the industry. And today on the show, I'm very excited to have Gary Cornelius. He's VP of Business Development at TCW. And also, this is his last month as a TMSA board member. So before we let him go off the board, but not out of TMSA or out of one call away to be one of my advisors, I wanted to get him on the show, talk about his legacy at the association in the industry and just all things Gary. So how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jen. How about you?
Very good. Happy to have you here. You've had nearly a 4-decade career in transportation. So I'm curious, what has kept you engaged over time in an industry for that long, especially one that's known for its, ups and downs and craziness and back and forth and never knowing what's happening next, which might be it. But what's kept you engaged this long?
I think I found out pretty early that this is a great industry for those of us who bore easily, because there's nothing boring about what we do. All those changes that you just mentioned happen sometimes annually, sometimes monthly, sometimes weekly, sometimes hourly. And I've said for many years, we could move the same exact book of business every day and something would be different. And that's what's always kept me intrigued with this industry over the years, through the ups and downs. Certainly been some tough times, but it's never been boring. That's the thing I could say about it.
Yes, and it is the thing that you say about it, and you talk about how there is ups and downs, and it will come back. I remember when I kind of took on more of a sales function at TMSA, you were one of the people who get to listen to me ramble on all the time and ask advice. And you're like, oh yeah, it will come back one day. It will be okay. It's going to be okay. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I think I needed to hear that.
I remember the first manager I had that looked at me and said, this is cyclical. I thought the world was ending. I mean, I thought we were about to go out of business. I thought the entire economy was crashing. And, it's proven to me time and time again over the 39 years in the industry that we truly are in a cyclical industry.
So you mentioned that first manager. So kind of where you started your career back then to today, how do you feel the roles of sales and marketing in logistics have shifted?
Oh, wow. Which time, I would say. When I first got into business, it was more about the local traffic manager. There weren't a lot of shippers who had corporate decision-making centralized. It was more about the local relationship. And that was good and bad. And the good and bad was, that as those local managers made job changes, your business was at risk. There were also those that saw the benefit of their authority to gain themselves personally, and then so I was kind of relieved to see it come into more of a corporate decision-making role with our major shippers. But then most recently, I think one of the biggest changes we've had is that for years in sales, you sold to get the first appointment, and then the sales cycle started there. And this transition was already happening pre-COVID, but I think pre-COVID just fast forwarded it to where our decision makers realized they didn't have to see 10 salespeople to decide what 2 or 3 they wanted to move forward with, to decide who they wanted to vet, to eventually find one partner. They realized I can do all this electronically. I can do it with video call. I don't have to lose an entire day of seeing salespeople to do this. So I still believe that the personal visit and that on-site meeting is important. However, what we're seeing is that it's later in the sales cycle now. It's more about affirmation for that decision maker that yes, this is the right partner, than it is to start the sales process. I remember talking to a longtime industry friend when COVID first hit, And I asked him, I said, so, what are you going to do? I mean, we can't get in the market. What's your focus? He goes, oh man, that's easy. He said, I'm just going to hire nothing but sales managers who bring a book of business and contacts. I said, well, what are you going to do once they run through all their friends and family? And he just sat silently, that we truly had to change how we go to market to meet our decision makers where they are.
And when you did that, when you made that shift to meet them where they are, did you find that there was skills or approaches that you had to shift with that change?
Absolutely. Selling virtually is tremendously different than selling in person. To be able to make that same connection in a virtual environment via email, via phone, via video call, and to be able to build that same trust and credibility, because in the sales cycle, the sales manager is establishing personal trust and credibility, and then that personal trust and credibility gets parlayed to the company. And to be able to do that virtually is tremendously different than being able to do it in person or over lunch or over dinner or things of that nature. So yes, we had to partner with some industry friends and TMSA friends to really help us hone our skills in being able to go to market virtually when that in-person meeting comes so late in the sales cycle now.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, as you were talking, there's when you meet someone, and if you're grabbing a coffee, if you're going to lunch, whatever that looks like, you have time to like ease into past the awkwardness of when you first meet someone or you first start talking to someone to get to the end of that. But like if you're virtual with an email or even a Zoom call, like you don't have time to get past the awkwardness. You have to just like create the comfort there right away. That would be really different for sure.
I think we've lost two things. First is that time, of just getting to know each other. The second is something I was trained to do many, many years ago, was the landscape you're in will give you clues as to what's important to this individual personally, and use that to find common ground. It may be a picture on a credenza of a golf foursome or their family, their kids, their grandkids, and you find that personal connection, that common ground. Well, what we found when you started going virtually, first, you didn't have that time. Second, most people are blurred out in their background or in an environment like me right now, just with a painted wall behind you, to where you don't have that ability to do that. So how do you do that? And I think one of the things we had to learn was you do a lot of that before you ever get on the call. You do a lot of that in doing your research, not only on the company, but on the individual. I remember in our first shippers panel at Elevate, we had Tony Bodis, and Tony talked about doing your research on not only the company, but on the person. And he talked about a particular sales manager who reached out to him and said, and in that reach out, said, hey, I see that you're an Ohio State fan, go Bucks, and just, doing that research behind the scenes to find that personal opportunity to connect with the prospect.
Mm-hmm. I do. I think that's so important because it is like you don't build relationships with the logo, you build it with the person. And so understanding the person, and then of course, doing your best to put that information into your CRM so that you keep that information, because then you help build that knowledge over time so that every time you meet the person virtually or through email, it's not the first time. And I always tell people to, like, even simple things like, this person is not a morning person. Don't call them before 9:30. Like, I just had someone ask me if they could meet me at 8:30, and I was like, fine. But I know that I will have to like be functional a little bit earlier than I am used to because I'm terrible in the morning. don't really try to talk to people before at least 1.5 cups of coffee, because I don't make sense. So but that's like that should be on, if anyone is putting their notes on me, like write that down because it's just true. Or like, yes, if you greet me with a coffee or ask me if I want to go for a virtual coffee or in person, I'm going to say yes. There's never, I will show up for coffee. It's just true. But I feel like stuff like that's really important.
Absolutely.
Because you're building that. And so we live in this world now where there's data, there's digital tools, there's automation growing that can help field some of that information. But where do you see that human element, the relationship building that trust, building your network? How does that still matter the most in freight, sales, and marketing? Because it really does. And is there ever going to be a real evolution on that?
Everybody wants to talk about data. Everybody wants to talk about AI. Everybody wants to talk about, the analysis, and all that's important. They're important tools. But I coach my sales team all the time. We've used a phrase ever since the market started opening back up, where I look at them, I say, showing up matters. Showing up matters. Your personal investment. When you make that personal investment to get to where that prospect is, and to invest your personal time in them, that matters. The data is critical. It's an important tool, but it will never replace the trust and credibility that a prospect or a customer places in their representative and in their service provider. I think the data is another way that the sales model has changed, is that we're delivering more data today than we ever have. And that's a good thing. And from that data, we can increase our credibility with our customers by suggesting solutions, finding ways that we can bring more value to not only them, but to ourselves, and both of us gaining value out of the partnership.
So we talked a little bit about the research and how important the research is now in virtual. I'm curious. I didn't prep this question, but I'm curious on it. Is there, and because I know too, like there's automation that you could be like, here's this person's LinkedIn or here's their name, tell me everything about them. Is there anything that get with that we then learn too much about people that's creepy if you say it to them upon meeting them for the first time? Like Ohio State fan, that seems pretty safe. But like being like, this is the name of your kid, how was his second day of third grade? Like that would be creepy to me. How do you have to train your team not to utilize the creepy information, like using too much personal information, like where that balance, like, hey, let's build a camaraderie and a trust, but also not like being like I was stalking you on the internet?
Absolutely. I remember we were training our customer service team to be more present virtually when COVID hit as well. And one of the things that I gave them, I said, okay, on our call next month, I want you to tell me something you learned about this person personally. There were some great coaching moments that came out of that with 18 or 20 customer service people on the call, because some of the things they came to the table with, I was like, okay, that is way too much information. So yes, I think, we still have to look at it through a very professional lens, and what is appropriate. Certainly collegiate, athletics, even where they attended college, maybe their career path, if they've been somewhere else that we serve or have served in our careers. But I think when you get beyond that, I think you start dropping in professionalism that risk being able to build that credibility. Because the thing we have to remember is, in our job as sales managers, they're not looking for a best friend.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for a quality service provider that can bring value to them. That's different than a best friend. And you have to maintain that certain decorum, that certain professionalism, even virtually, and in a world to where people put anything on social media today.
Mm-hmm.
And you can learn way too much real quick.
Yeah.
So then how do you use that in a professional setting to build credibility and trust?
Yeah, I think that I really like that point. Like you want to build a relationship, but it's still a professional relationship in which you're trying to gain their business. And so having that lens on, that perspective on when you're going there, because I think, I mean, yes, I do this podcast weekly. Anyone can listen to it. I talk about things. You can learn things from, which is fine. If you're like, oh, I remember you talked about this or whatever. But there would be a point in which I felt creepy that people were really sitting in and trying to research me as a person. That would make me feel uncomfortable. And so you don't want to do that either. So given all of these changes, your long-term view into the industry, if a commercial team then really wanted to build a career-worthy pipeline, so not just this quarter, so not that guy that you were talking about that was like, I'm going to hire the sales managers with the book, what should they be focusing on now? Is it personal branding? Is it internal processes? Is it external partnerships? Where should they be putting their focus to build long-term success?
I think it's both personal and corporate branding is one of the most important things. And in developing that network of contacts that opens the door for opportunities through that personal branding. The other thing too that I think is brought us a lot of value, me personally as well as us corporately, is know when to say no. We're not always the best solution. You know, you can't be all things to a customer. And our clients are smart, savvy individuals. They know that. And if you come to them, I can do everything, then you are damaging your own credibility with that person. Know when to say no. We've said no to a lot of clients over the years. I personally have as well. And one of the things I like to say is I'd rather say no to something I know is not within our strengths and live to play another day with you than I would to say yes and potentially jeopardize the entire relationship. And I think we get a lot of respect from prospects and from customers when we're willing to say, you know, we're probably not your best solution for this. And possibly even recommend other solutions, other companies that you know of, that this is their niche, this is their forte, this is their strength.
Mm-hmm. I do. I think that solves kind of two problems. Number one, I do think too often I see that branding of like, we can do everything, but they don't care that you can do everything. They care what you can do for them. You doing everything doesn't help them if you can't be very good at the thing they need you to do. And so I actually feel like that's like a marketing misstep that I see a lot in the industry, is that like, we can solve all problems thing, because you just can't. And if you can, what do you do really, really well? And then go after those people. And then two, like you said, there are things in which you can't do as well as somebody else. And as you are building trust, as you're building your brand, as you're building your brand reputation, if you then are not successful in the thing you said yes to, that is what people are going to remember.
You know, we talked in a breakout session at our recent executive summit too about one thing that has kind of lost some of its steam with our industry, with ourselves, and it's really interesting because you made the comment a minute ago that they're interested in what you can do for them, and that's very true. I talk with my sales team all the time that, you know, every prospect you're talking to is talking to you through the lens of what's in this for me. But one of the things that has lost steam is the value of the discovery call, you know, and really finding out where that client is, where that prospect is, what their pain points are, what their challenges are, instead of all the grand and glorious things you can do for them. You know, I remember I had a sales manager one time, and we're asset based, and I had a sales manager walk in, and it's about the third prospect I heard him tell, we run all Peterbilt Model 579 tractors. And when we left there, I told him, I said, if you ever tell another prospect that, I will fire you on the spot. They don't care. Mm-hmm. All they care about is how is our fleet dependable enough to take care of their business. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I think one of the things that in building that career-worthy book of business is really focusing on discovery, meeting each individual client where they are, rather than coming in with a pre-canned presentation about you or about your company or your service. because that doesn't help them in any way, shape, or form if it doesn't address their issue. And I talk to my sales team all the time that you don't know what your value prop is until you know what the customer's issues are. And the only way you're going to get there is through an effective discovery process.
I do. One of my favorite little tools that follows meetings is when it tells you how long you talked in the meeting and like how many like monologue minutes you have and stuff. I feel like that's really great for sales because exactly what you said, like you should be listening, hearing what they need, and then adapting what you're saying back to them based on that. And a lot of times we just go right into what we think they need. Even if you're doing your due diligence because you did your research and you're like, I think that this is what they need. We're still then skipping that step where we're actually listening to them. And until we do that, they're not going to really trust us anyways, because like, you didn't even bother to listen.
And if you're asking the right, correct questions, it's going to give you the opportunity to make your value points.
So how do you think the next 5-10 years will be defined for freight sales and marketing professionals?
I think I was talking with someone in the industry just a few weeks ago, and we talked about we're seeing the cyclical move in sales also kind of back to that personal contact a little bit and back to that personal consultant. I think, bringing value is going to continue to grow, bringing solutions rather than just providing capacity or providing service. It's going to get beyond 98.5% on time. And I think that's a good thing, because in bringing those solutions and bringing that value, two things happen. First of all, that's where both companies win. In that the customer's getting a solution, a value-added solution, but you're also gaining the benefit of that value-added solution. And I think that's also what is the foundation for long-term partnerships rather than short-term business.
And is there any kind of emerging challenge or opportunity that they should be preparing for today as they move forward to the future?
I think we as an industry, and certainly in sales, every conference I've been at, you hear AI, and where does AI fit? And where does AI help us bring a better product to our customers? I was talking with our IT group the other day, and I said, and we were having this conversation, and one of them was talking about this and that and the other, and I said, oh, that's great if you're in a B2C industry, but we're not. We're in a B2B industry, and most of our customers are not looking for a self-service model. Most of our customers expect us to provide them the backside functions that they need. They don't want, they're not going to go on our website and find an invoice, or they're not going to go on our website and book a load with an AI agent. They expect that personal connection. And I think in sales, we're seeing that come back a little bit more in the importance because our customers are looking for solutions. They're looking for who can add value, who can make my job, my life easier, and who can bring my company savings. And those savings might not all be rate. They might be a solution that increases efficiency. And that is best accomplished through that personal connection and that personal engagement. And I think that's one thing that AI will never replace in B2B business.
I agree. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit. This is kind of multi-layered. So I talked about at the beginning of the opening of the show that this is your last month as a TMSA board member. So I'm curious, kind of what got you involved in TMSA in the first place, what got you to serve on the board. And then after we talk about TMSA a little bit, I know giving back is such a big part of who you are. So I do want to just talk about your volunteer work and what it means to you holistically as well.
All right. So what got me involved in TMSA was an industry friend who I got a mailer and about a conference, and I got to looking, and his picture was on there, and he was listed as a board member, and I put a lot of confidence and trust in my old friend Chuck, and
I was like, I know what we're talking about.
so I called him, and we talked about it, and I attended my first event, and it was very beneficial. And at the time, TMSA also had an IT type based or a electronic type conference in tools and things of that nature. And I believe that's the first time I met you when you were in Chicago when you were in a previous career. But I was looking for some tools, and excuse me. So I attended that, and just really saw the value in TMSA, not in the standpoint of adding revenue, adding business. We go to a lot of conferences, a lot of things that are about interaction with prospects and customers. But for me, I think one of the things that I figured out when we talk about all these changes in the industry, you never stop learning. You never stop developing. And I think one of the weaknesses in a lot of sales leaders is that, I was having this conversation with Holly Laboda just last week, that a lot of sales leaders get moved into sales leadership because they're phenomenal salespeople. And it's different leading a team than it is going to market yourself. And a lot of times they get in that role and they don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, I saw an opportunity with TMSA. First of all, I've never been involved in an organization whose membership was as transparent and willing to engage. I mean, we walk out of these meetings and we go compete with each other. Mm-hmm. People talk best practices. I was talking with somebody a few years ago about an idea I was thinking about trying, and he literally said to me, "Man, I spent $25,000 trying to do that, and it failed miserably. Don't do it." So that candidness and that transparency and willing to share, and realizing that this market's big enough for all of us, and how can we all win in a market this big? The other thing too was I've always felt strongly about partners we choose, whether it's marketing consultancy, sales training, CRMs, different things. I've always felt strongly about them understanding our industry and being a part of our industry, because if you're not careful, you spend the first 25-30% of an engagement teaching them what we do, teaching them which end of the truck the freight goes in, and so, the other thing that TMSA has brought to me has been some true knowledgeable partners that have come along beside us in the sales and marketing sector to really help us improve our game and help us improve our efforts. So those are some of the biggest values that, how I got involved, and then some of the biggest values. And being on the board, I've always personally felt, and we as a company, TCW, feel strongly about, if we're going to be involved in an organization, then we need to be all in. We don't just need to be showing up and getting the good out of it. We do this with IANA. We do it with American Trucking Association. We've certainly done it with TMSA, with state level associations. That we have people on the boards, we have people on steering committees, we have people on working committees. Not only was I a board member, but I was very actively involved in the education committee for many years as well. We just think that's the right thing to do. Is that bring your strength along with and give as much as you get. And then you mentioned my volunteerism. I am very passionate about being involved in something bigger than me. Certainly for personal motivations, I've gotten involved in cancer philanthropy, both on fundraising standpoint, as well as doing a tremendous amount of advocacy and using our experience to impact policy. But I talk to our young professionals all the time about what they're involved in that's bigger than them, and how are you helping leave this, our society, our country, our world a better place for somebody coming behind you. And we take that very seriously. Having been so close to the cancer world, how can I use that to improve the process or improve the environment for those coming behind us in the fight against cancer? We feel the same way about industry. How can I contribute to TMSA in a way that positions TMSA to be a better partner to the corporate memberships?
Mm-hmm. And as you round out your time here on the TMSA board, what legacy do you hope that you leave behind on your time here?
3 things, actually. First is we fought hard to bring the balance of sales and marketing to the organization. And I've often been the sales voice in a room full of marketers,
Mm-hmm.
and beating the sales drum constantly, and making sure we're bringing value to the sales side. I think that looks differently for TMSA than it does marketing, because even as a sales leader, I'll tell you, it's difficult for me to justify pulling my entire team out of the market and to go to a conference that doesn't yield immediate opportunities for business. So how can we train the trainer? How can we bring sales stuff to our salespeople where they are? Whether it's tracks, whether it's online, whatever it is. So, first, the emphasis on sales. The other 2 are related specifically to our conference. I'm really excited to have been a part of bringing the voice of the customer to our events. And that, I think that's so critically important. We can sit in a room as sales and marketers and talk about best practices, but until we hear the perspective of our buyer on what works and doesn't work with them, how do we really know that these best practices are going to win business and are going to maintain business and build those relationships? The second thing is, in today's world where we are expected to be knowledgeable and bring almost a consultant position to our customers, is bringing the economic perspective to our membership and the economic panel and the power group we have on that. I mean, we have DAT and Bloomberg and ATA represented in a way that they're like, hey, sign me up. We'll be back every year. Mm-hmm. And to me, those are, I look at those and feel with pride that I was able to be a part of that through the education committee, and help bring those to our membership and our efforts.
Mm-hmm. So Dean from DAT is on the episode before yours. And so when I was highlighting your episode, like, come back for Gary, he's like, we love Gary. I'm like, we do, which is really funny. And I would say if those are the 3 major things that you would like as your legacy, I would say you've been successful in doing all those things. You mentioned that we met first at TMSA, and in my past life, I did, I was a vendor at TMSA before taking over. And then just through this role, you have always been one of the voices that I trusted the most. And I told you at the very beginning when I took this job that, like, I put your little sales voice on my shoulder and it whispers in my ear the whole time. I will miss that dearly, having you off the board, but I still have your phone number. So I will definitely still make you listen to me and advise me. But I wanted to take the space to just thank you for all that you've done for the organization. But for me personally, in my own leadership journey, when I took this role, I was pretty green on many things that I was doing. And without the support, but like true action-based support of people in the organization, I wouldn't be where I am. And you're definitely one of those people who helped guide the process the most. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I've chosen to step away from the board for a reason. I'm stepping back, but I'm not stepping away. Mm-hmm. In typical TCW fashion, we will continue to engage. Our marketing manager is actively involved now. Mm-hmm. As I look at sunsetting my career in a couple of years, I'll be engaging my successor in TMSA, possibly as soon as Elevate, to engage him. In typical TCW fashion, we'll continue to contribute. And, I want to go back to your development. It goes back to what I said a minute ago about sales leaders, is that you have to have a willingness to learn. And that's the thing that I think has been one of your strengths, Jen, in this role coming in. Particularly, I mean, you were very candid. I don't know anything about sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sales strategy task force is looking, sitting there going, yeah, but you're dang good at it. I think that's another thing too that I love about TMSA is that it is so volunteer led that it brings so much expertise and so much knowledge to the table because it's industry professionals leading this along beside you, leading this organization. I mean, I don't think anybody would ever realize how lean TMSA is as far as staffing.
Yeah.
That it truly relies on the membership to drive its success. And that's refreshing in this organization.
It does. Even, I mean, you mentioned, being one of the co-chairs for education and bringing on those panels. I love when people come into the education committee and like the first thing they're like, wow, there's so much. Yes, there is so much that committee does. I pick like the keynote speaker. That's pretty much it. And I still have to get approval from the committee. There's some things that I put in, but I rely on the people in the industry to really have their finger on the pulse of what's going to matter the most. And I can give suggestions and things like that. But like without that committee, the programming doesn't exist. So.
And another reason I've chosen to step back from the board is I also believe in bench depth, and I believe in term limits. I think I think if it's the same group all the time, there's no fresh ideas, there's no fresh thought, and I believe in bench depth, and I believe in developing our next group of leaders, not only corporately, but as an association as well. Who's that next group of industry professionals willing to step into these roles and contribute to what I would call our organization?
Absolutely. Well, you did tell me that when you came into the board that I will not be here forever. I will serve my time and then we'll let you know when I'm done. And so here we are, which I appreciate the time served. And I agree. I think that it's been a joy to work with you. And yes, like you said, you're stepping off the board, but not out of TMSA. And we love your support and TCW support. Last question that I ask everyone who comes on the show. If you could go back in time and advise a younger self, anything, and this could be personally or professionally, when would you go back to and what would you say?
I was a very brash young professional. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think there's two things that I would say to myself. I had to learn through some hard experiences that I needed to never quit learning. That I would say to myself is that first, always continue learning, always be open-minded to new ideas. The second, and this comes into play not only as a sales professional, but certainly even more as a sales leader, that it's more about the people than it is the process. As I've worked to train, TCW, we have a growth from within structure, and we hire young professionals just about every semester and bring them through our ranks. I've had some success stories with doing that, and I've had some failures where what was working with these two individuals, I tried to apply to a third individual, and it failed miserably because in leading salespeople, it's no different than our prospects. That everyone's a different personality. Everyone has different challenges. And as a leader, we have to meet our team where they are. Yes, we all have standards. Yes, we all have, certain criteria we have to meet, certain goals we have to hit. However, how we get there needs to look differently according to what each individual's strengths are. And I think that's the two things I would tell myself is that first, never quit learning, never stop learning, never think you've reached a point to where you've learned everything you need to. And second, it's a lot more about the people that surround you than it is you. And how you bring the work of the group together is much more powerful than what any one individual can do.
Absolutely. I think that is great advice. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you for all of your support at TMSA and just for sharing your knowledge about the industry overall. It's always great to hear from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and look forward to our activities with TMSA through the next year.
Perfect. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.